Hollywood Bowl. They had like that countdown clock instead of stage for the curve too. And they're like in the middle of that song. I'm like,
G'day everyone.
and Matt like
Welcome to the Advanced Management Panel. To steal Tom's joke from just before, the mediocre panel is tomorrow, mediocre manager panel. As a lot of you know, this whole Big Sound shebang is run by two managers, pretty much like Maggie and Nick. So they've got it pretty bang on in terms of this panel and the lineup, and very excited to chat with Tom Wiernan from Post Hoc Management, the national UMO. He's also worked on a lot of festivals. And we have Chad Gillard from Future Classic, obviously one of the biggest success stories in Australian music in the past decade. Jodie Reagan from Spinning Top Music, of course. Tame Impala and every other family of bands that are intertwined there. And Nick Yates from Unified. He manages, looks after like Illy, Violent Soho, Kite String Tangle, Nina Las Vegas. And we have Matt Ash from Raw Power Management. Looks after a lot of metal bands, including Bring Me the Horizon, who will be touring here very soon. It's a good plug. Yeah.
Go buy a ticket.
You can pay me later. My name is Lachlan Kanonyuk. I'm the editor of Faster Louder. In my experience in the music industry, I don't really have much or anything to do with management, so I'm like quite excited and interested to actually find out what it is you guys do. Like my idea of management is Ian Faith in This Is Spinal Tap saying, "There's no sex and drugs for Ian David. I find lost luggage. I locate mandolin strings in the middle of Austin." What was your idea of management when you first got into the music industry, and what is the actual reality of it now? Start with you, Tom.
That's a pretty good Spinal Tap quote. I think that's pretty on point, actually. I guess what attracted me originally to get into management was just the fact that you're really close to the creativity. I feel like there's probably no more job in this industry where you get that close to the artist, for good and bad, I think, in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think that that's sort of what attracted me, and I think it's pretty much like what I expected. I think you do a lot more of the nitty-gritty and stuff like that than I would have thought when I got into it. But yeah, the way I describe it is sort of like you're like the CEO of this small international company.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, you really have to like connect all the dots, you know. If a band's touring somewhere, like how are they getting there? Like what's the crew that needs to be along? Is there merchandise? Is there, who's the publicist? Like do you need to set up interviews? And planning album cycles and all that. So it's really sort of like you're the spokesperson for the artist and connecting all the dots with their team.
Yeah. Do you feel the same, Chad?
I mean, the way we started into management, we came from a label background. So Future Classic started as like a vinyl, and like it's a techno and house imprint in 2004. We were finding that we were working across lots of different facets of our artists' careers, but at a certain point, they would feel they would need management, and often it would be a friend that would be engaged, and it would kind of irk us sometimes. But I guess coming from that label background first, and like pretty much everyone that we manage, we do have label agreements with as well. So the way we approach management, it's a very A&R driven process. Learning the technical side, the financial side, like the real business side, especially like you said, the international part of it. You know, it's a challenge, but it's the most satisfying part when you're like somewhere overseas and that stuff starts to come together and you're like, holy shit, we're in New York and this is happening. But yeah, I mean, it's different with every different artist, which is like there is no one single way that it works. Some artists that we work with are very self-sufficient in certain ways, others very much not. So yeah, it's a case-by-case thing, but I don't know if we had an expectation of what it would be like. We're stoked with how it's going, but yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I don't know if I really ever had an expectation of what I thought it would be. I think I was just fascinated by the music and the artist, and I just wanted to play a part in that. As Tom said, I think it's our jobs as managers to just alleviate as much responsibility from the artist so they can focus on writing good music and playing good shows and ultimately being creative. I think that's the main point. But I don't know, I don't think I really had any expectations. It's pretty hard to, you know, if we were to sit here and try and describe what a manager does, we'd need, you know, much longer than an hour. But yeah, as Chad said, I mean, and as both these guys have said, it's been, you know, it's pretty exciting to be this close to the artist and to be able to, I don't know, you're kind of their bodyguard in a lot of ways, and you're their point person with their label and their agent and their publisher, and protecting them from the outside world in a lot of ways as well. So
Yeah. And how about you, Jody? Because you were there, I guess, at the beginning of this movement. Like, did you want to be a manager? And like, yeah.
I didn't even know it was a thing.
Yeah.
I had no idea that was a thing. I was in a venue, basically. I had a little tiny venue that I was almost forced to look after because no one else I was working at a pub and they built a little venue and they were like, you love music, you can have it. We don't even know what to do with it. So I was like, okay. Bands started playing there and I started seeing these great bands, and for whatever reason, I just started giving them advice, I guess. Or maybe like if they'd played a show and they didn't think it was that great, and you know, I was the bartender and they'd come talk to me and be like, oh, I don't think it was that great. I'd be like, well, maybe you could do this or this. And they'd be like, oh, that's a great idea. And then it just really seriously grew from just that, doing that. I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. And then people sort of came to rely on the fact that they would come to me for this or that. And then it just grew into actually going, you know what, I want to spend more time doing this. And maybe I can help you. Maybe I can send your album off to a radio station or something like that. Maybe they will like the music or something, I don't know. And it just really grew from there. And for it to have developed to this point where, and I think that as a manager, you know, you never really know what's coming the next day because you've never done it before. Like each step of the way of success that you're having you've never done it before. So it's like each and every day you're learning something new and how to deal with something new, which I love because you just really don't know what's going to happen every day. And like you said, being the point person, you're like the absolute filter. It looks like everyone's got to go through you to get to the band. Like, you know, you're the direct relationship with everybody else. So it is this huge responsibility. And the other thing is, I think that I always find really interesting is like not forgetting that the band are actually your boss. Yeah. Like the manager is not the boss. Like we work for them and we do for them. Like even sometimes when you don't agree, you still actually work for them, you know.
I think we'll elaborate on that point.
yeah. I always say it's their company, they just employ us to run it for
That's
them.
right.
So.
Yeah.
True. And what about you, Matt? What was it like in the UK when you started out?
Well, for me, I was in bands and had played in bands, and I think that was what led me into the idea of getting into management, was the fact that I'd kind of been aware of how diverse the situation is when you're being bombarded with gigs and tours and labels and publishing and merchandise and everything else, and that was something that I was kind of doing already. And then when I came to get into management, it was just a continuation of that, really. And as the guys have said, you are basically working on 101 different things at all at the same time, you know. So it kind of was the varied nature of it was something that appealed to me. It's never boring. It's never dull. Everything's very, you know, spontaneous a lot of the time. You're dealing with problems that come up and issues that come, you know, at you right, left, and centre, and you're kind of like, it's exciting. It's interesting to get involved in various aspects of the industry. So to have a perspective across all the components of an artist's career was something that really was quite appealing to me. And it's also something that, as managers, we have to moderate and control as much as we can, because a lot of the time a label or a merchandiser or whoever it might be is going to have an agenda that they're working to, and that's not necessarily going to fit in with everything else that's happening at the same time. And so controlling that and sort of having an overview, you're the only person really in the whole organisation that has that perspective and can kind of see everything that's happening, and it's working out when and where to sort of press go on certain things and hold back on others. And that was something that I found quite appealing and sort of led me to get into it, I think.
Yeah, well, like, you've all had like at least 10 years experience, I guess, as like in management. A lot has changed in that time, and it's like year by year, all these things come up. Like, there's a lot of talk about like playlisting at Big Sound, and I was like, I didn't really know that was a thing. And then like, so all these new factors, and you as like advanced managers, how do you sort of like, I didn't do the air quotes. How do you like look at, I guess, the future and like what's happening, how you can innovate and use these new developments with your artists?
I'm really optimistic. I actually think right now is the best it's been in 10 years, in my opinion. I think this playlisting, the strength of playlisting and streaming in general has, in some ways, playlisting is editorial, but like streaming in general has put a lot of strength in like the fans' hands as far as like what they want to listen to. I think it's been so much, you have these gatekeepers and press and stuff that really determine like, oh, is this like the new thing to listen to? But I think with streaming, it's kind of put a little bit more power in fans' hands. So like if something doesn't necessarily get all the best reviews and stuff, like if the fans dig it, they're going to keep listening to it, and then playlist people notice that. And so I think that for one thing, that's really positive. For example, like UMO was just in, we were talking about this earlier, but in Buenos Aires, and they played in front of like 1,500 people. They had never been there. They had never done any press there. And I think a lot of that has to do with just like the availability of the music in Argentina. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else I can add to that.
So, Matt, like, you deal with a very genre-specific, I guess, roster. How does that sort of, how does your knowledge of this like particular genre benefit you as opposed to, I guess, like other management that have like a broad range of genre artists?
I don't think it's particularly different, to be honest. I think, you know, the company that I represent is very much in the sort of hard alternative rock, metal type categories. But to be honest, I think everybody's working as much as possible with a broad view of trying to expand out of being pigeonholed into one corner of the industry. Like, as much as we do work with hard rock stuff, we also work with some alternative stuff and some poppier things as well. And, you know, I think the streaming, for example, as is currently the situation with the different formats that are out there, is only benefiting all of our bands to expand, because people are getting to hear music a lot more accessibly than they ever have before. So that's only a positive thing and a good thing, you know?
Yeah.
And I think artists have never really had more control over their own careers as they do right now with social media and with controlling their own right. Like, streaming's a great thing, and I think you're going to see over time artists just controlling more of their rights.
I think they're really having fun with it as well. Like, my bands are just like, it's great because we can just do something tomorrow. Like, we can just go, hey, why don't we just, you know, drop this song on somewhere.
Album.
Yeah, anything. It's just like that, really, like the control in their hands, and the fact that they can really have fun with it and like a certain freedom with it.
Yeah.
Is really
well,
good.
with that and with social media, like it can take like one idiotic social media post to like completely stall a career. And that's obviously if the artist is a dickhead, but like you guys don't work with dickheads, looking at your roster. But like, is that a fear, like having that, the artist having so much control? Like where do you meet, like in terms of your control and the artist's control in terms of what's happening?
In terms of if you're talking specifically about social media, I'm sure everyone will agree every artist is different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some of them are super hands-on and want to be completely in control of it. Others are happy to be somewhat hands-off and let management kind of orchestrate the posts a little bit more. So yeah, it really depends. I fortunately haven't had any experience with having to keep a lid on things. I don't know if
Me
anyone
neither.
here wants to divulge any
No,
horror
I
stories, but
haven't.
yeah, fingers, like, touch wood. So,
I mean, it's the exciting thing about that, though, is that it is in the artist's hands.
Yeah.
And certain artists, you know, one of the biggest things about Flume, which I don't know if people really would see now, because like it seems like, oh yeah, that was going to do well, a big part of that was right when Facebook and Instagram was actually happening.
Yeah.
That was natural to Harley. He was at an age where like, yeah, all my friends use Instagram, they all use Facebook. They interact with their friends that way.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, I'm gonna text you. It's like, I'm gonna speak with you publicly. Anyone can see this. You'll see the photos. And just what you were saying earlier about streaming, I think an interesting part about the playlisting conversation, which is definitely floating around this conference,
Yeah.
like for Future Classic, not just on the management side, but on the label side as well, like SoundCloud was a huge thing for us.
Yeah.
That was like, streaming isn't a new thing, but like the way that it is now, like there's a very regimented, like sort of approach to it. And like playlisting is like a very powerful way to do it. But for a long time, one of the most powerful tools that we had was that we got on board with SoundCloud early. We were beta testers. We knew Force, who actually started the company, and we were like, as a concept, this is fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like the idea, what you said about like, you can just upload something. But
You sort of said was there as in like past tense. Is like SoundCloud still?
I think they're having a tough time, yeah.
Yeah.
I think like there's definitely still relevance for it, of course, but it's not, we see it. It's a very like clear thing. It's not as powerful for us as it was. Like it was there was a certain point in time about 3 or 4 years ago where if we put something up on our SoundCloud versus the artist's SoundCloud, which might not have as much, you could see the difference in play counts and interaction in like 60 to 70% differences.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think streaming is going anywhere soon.
Yeah.
But just that point that you guys were making, the artist instinct, like, and you saying
Yeah.
like, they're our boss. Like,
Yeah.
it's about figuring out how to tell that story for them and how they want it to be told. And being at like a playlist, like me, like wanting to know what my favorite artist is listening to, that's super engaging content. And it kind of bums me out when an artist doesn't want to share that.
Yeah,
It's like, come on
totally.
guys, like let's get into
Yeah.
this. Like, yeah.
Well, Tom, you mentioned at the start there, it's like management is sort of being the CEO of like a small international like business. Like it is with like touring and like regions, it is just a around the clock thing. Like how do you sort of, I guess, like find time to sleep, and like what's your like, when do you sort of switch off? And
Yeah, that's the hardest thing I think
Yeah.
about management, and it's something that I think I've been struggling with for about 10 years now. I think the key thing, especially with touring, is just to and just actually in general when you're managing business, surround yourself with the best people you possibly can to work with, whether it's your booking agent or it's their tour manager, their production manager, their like people that will get the job done in the best way possible. And the better the people are working with them, the less calls you're going to get at like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
or and stuff like that. So I think that's the most important thing. It's like, and I think that's something that I'm struggling with. One of my bands now is they're kind of at a certain point you get in like production levels for a live show is you really need like these super top pro people, and they're kind of holding on to their friends that they've been touring with that maybe aren't the best people, and I think it's trying to making that transition and helping them with that. But yeah, I think that's the most important thing, is to surround yourself with good people.
That point about teams, like, I mean, the way Future Classic works, it's not like there'll be a point person, a contact person for an artist, but we operate in teams. So my business partner, Nathan McClay, for instance, on Flume, he runs Point. If you wanted to negotiate a deal, if you want to do something that's actually like financially related, you'd definitely be speaking to him. But he's the face of it. It's a conversation that happens between 4 or 5 people in our room. And that's with our setup. We have the label in there as well. Domestically, we book most of our artists as well. I think that thing about teams is super important, and that's one of the core functions of a manager, is actually maintaining, engaging, running that team, and knowing, like you said, when is the point when this team actually needs to change, to grow, to scale back, that's hard stuff, especially when it is like friends of an artist that, they could have come up over years with that person, but at a certain point it's like, shit, we're playing arenas now. How are we going to do this? And I'm guessing on this panel, everyone here has probably gone through that, and it is a challenging part. Like, you say you're CEO, but you're also kind of the HR department as well.
It's something that really only happens with time as well, because you need perspective on an artist's career and the people that they're working with in terms of tour managers or publicists or whoever it is. You can't, these jobs don't really allow their true sort of situations to come through overnight. It's something that only you maybe need to do an album cycle to understand that this is where the strengths and weaknesses are within the team. So when I think everybody here has worked with artists for a long period of time, and from my experience, you know, I've one of the things I've learned is that when to step back and let the team do their job. Because ideally, as you say, as Tom was saying, like, we don't really want the 2 a.m. phone call coming through. If I'm getting a call at 2 a.m., it's probably because something really bad has happened. Yeah. It's like really bad has happened, because 99 times out of 100, any issues that come up on the road, or you know, if it's at a festival or if it's an album launch or wherever it is that's happening around the world, if we've done our job right, we've got a team in place that is with the band that can actually handle the issues that come up.
Yeah, they shouldn't even be getting
Yeah.
to you.
It's mainly the artists that bug me in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Totally. It's like
The
3 a.m. It's like,
psychology.
But that's actually
No, so when you were
No.
saying about like being introduced to this as like a bartender, I'm like, that is kind of your job. Like half the time it's like being this like bartender that
psychological
sits there
test.
with a late night
Yeah.
conversation.
No, I think it's important to touch on that though, Jody. If you're talking about the artist contacting you at 2 in the morning, I mean, obviously we'll all answer phone calls from our artists at any given time, assuming we're awake. But it's also important to set boundaries
Yeah.
with the artist. And
Yeah.
as we've been doing this for close to a decade, and you know, back in the day we would have, you know, walked over hot coals, you know, rain, hail or shine, and we still would. But our artists definitely respect that we also have lives outside of our
Definitely.
work.
I
And
don't
if they do
respond to them at
do
2
call me on a weekend or after hours, it'll be like, hey, sorry, but what's going on with this?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for any manager to establish that separation.
Yeah, well, like, how does that relationship change over the years with like success and like global success? Like your direct relationship, like you said, you got these teams, so I guess there's like some more distance. But like, what's the bond there, and how does that develop and get refined over the course of a career?
As long as you've always got the artist's best interests at heart, then
Yeah.
it's fine.
I think it's gotten way easier for me, because I feel like in the early years, when the artist is really trying to find out who they are and what they want and how they want to do it, that's when it was difficult, you know, and maybe we weren't even seeing the same way or whatever, and then it becomes refined. Like now, it's so peaceful for me. Like with Tame Impala, like we're at a point where it's just so smooth. You know, we know what each other wants, we know what each other needs, we know, you know, we've got the team in place, and it just rolls along so smoothly. I think the early years are the hardest ones.
Yeah, I think as my artists have more success, I think my relationships with them actually get stronger.
Same.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
everyone would agree
Well,
with
it's
that.
like a
but-
personal relationship,
It's
isn't it?
trust,
that
I think.
yeah.
You know, they can trust you now to do what, you know, because we represent what they do, you know, we're the face of everything they do. We make it all happen, and if we're doing it in a way that makes them really happy, then they're trusting us more and more each day, you know?
And I think part of it is too, you kind of, as you work with them more and more, you anticipate like their needs and like how they're going to react to certain things, and you kind of know, like, before you even have to ask them about something, whether they're even big into it or not.
It becomes instinctive, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
totally.
You know what they feel,
Yeah.
you know how they're going to react to certain situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
you-
things that might have taken up hours of meetings in the
Yeah.
past become quick one-word answers on an email,
Yeah.
and they don't even become an issue.
Yeah, because you filter it all before it even gets to them,
Yeah.
you know?
And then what you said earlier, like when things are new, something that you can labor over for like months. When you look back at it even like 2 weeks later, it's like, that was an easy decision.
Yeah.
How easy was that? And it's like, we literally pulled our hair out for 2
Yeah.
months. Like, and as everyone just said, like as things get bigger, that level of trust, once you've gone through the fire a few times and you've actually gone through that process, it
Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah.
it sort of, you know, it steals you together. It helps sort of put that through. But something that I've found interesting lately is balancing the scale of artists that you work with. So
Yeah.
on the one hand, something like Harley, which is operating at a certain level, but then you'll have an artist which is just starting out, and like investing $500 in something can seem like a really big deal, and you're like, trust us, this is what you need to do right now, it's a
Yeah.
thing. And it's like, I do find it quite interesting, that level of perspective that artists get, and it's something that I do think the timing of things is super important. Like, I'm curious to know, like in this room, how many people are actually artists versus industry, because these are the kind of conversations like that can go either way. It can be very industry, or it can be very artist focused,
Yeah.
and I hope there's some artists out there and that you think we're doing all right. Yeah.
Cool. I guess like a non-standard case, Nick, is Violent Soho. Like, they were in the States. They were like doing like huge stadium tours or whatever with 30 Seconds to Mars. And I remember whenever it was they came back to Australia, and they were playing to like no one, opening laneway. They were getting like actual like vitriol from the crowd, and it seemed like it was like pretty much done and dusted in terms of like their major label then. And obviously, as we all know, like Violent Soho are now pretty much one of the biggest rock bands in Australia. Take us back to that point where you got on board with Soho, and like what the plan was, and like how it's got to this level now.
How it came about was actually their ex-manager, a guy, David Benj, who relocated to New York with them. The band, when they got dropped from their label Uni Motown and decided to move back to Australia from the US, that it was a mutual parting of ways because he wanted to stay in New York. And Jadden, my boss, was just by chance having coffee with David Benj in New York, and he mentioned it. And so Jadden sent me a Facebook message going, and by the way, I don't think Jadden has ever sent me a Facebook message, so I don't know why he chose that platform to communicate with me. But just this random thing being like, hey, should we manage Violent Soho? And my response was yes. But yeah, so we flew to Brisbane and met with the band. And yeah, as you said, they started from scratch.
Yeah. Well, what did you see there? Because they were like pretty much like at rock bottom locally.
Yeah, but I mean, their first two records are still great.
Yeah.
Like, they were always a great band, always an amazing live band. They always had fans. It just wasn't really done properly on that first record, the self-titled record, the first proper record. The problem was they went over to the US and spent too much time over there, didn't focus on Australia. They still did a tour that sold out, like the Zoo and Northcote Social Club and stuff, so it wasn't failing, but the difference was they came back, they were definitely defeated, going through the major label machine in the US and the touring machine over there. So yeah, they took a couple of years, they wrote an amazing record. I worked with the band pretty closely, and fortunately one of my best friends is Johan at IOU, and it was literally me and him hanging out in St Kilda, going out for Bloody Marys on a Saturday morning, and me playing Violent Soho demos in my car on the way there, and he took a shining to it, and I went, well, fuck it, if you're down, let's do it. And so we signed to IOU, and me and Johan just, as all these guys said, just built a good team around it, and we really believed in it. Johan put, like IOU was a small label at the time, and he put a lot of money into it for, it was kind of make or break for him, and fortunately it worked. But yeah, as we've been saying, we just built a good team, the band wrote a good record, we supported them, we built a strategy and executed it.
So Chad, like with Future Classic, obviously you got Harley, like Flume as the tentpole artist, but Future Classic has become this sort of, signpost, this label of quality. Like, how do you go about knowing what acts to get on Future Classic and, like, maintain that sort of, that identity as Future Classic?
It's one of those things, I guess the way we see ourselves is pretty different to how everyone else sees it.
Yeah.
A few years back, like 4 or 5 years ago, international press would refer to Future Classic as this really summery Australian label, and like, fuck that, we're dark.
Yeah.
Like, we're cool, and like, we've got like different looks. It's about sincerity for me. Like, when you see something or you engage with music that, like, you gotta have that like spark, but something that really sort of, either you can't put it down or you can't get it out of your head. And I still, we talk a lot internally at the office about, like, having, like, a Warp Grizzly Bear moment. Like, having that thing which turns it on its head that, like, when when Grizzly Bear signed to Warp, everyone's like, why are you signing to this Sheffield-founded, techno-based electronic label, you're Grizzly Bear? And then they put out Vicadamus, and everyone's like, well, yeah, that was obvious. Yeah. But, like, the idea of what you haven't heard or what you haven't done yet is probably the most exciting part of this. And as everyone was saying, like, that's being in management is really exciting for that reason. In terms of I guess there's multiple things that we work across as well. So when we sign something for management, it's got to be about whether we feel we can actually add something for that artist's career. Because there's artists that we love, respect, admire, but we might not be the best fit for them. We might not be the ones that are actually going to take them to the place they want to go. Like, you have to sort of share a vision. And I think we were lucky in Flume's case that, you know, it just sort of, the stars aligned in a way. We weren't like, we didn't go into that being like, we're going to make this kid a star. I remember the first time he came into the office wearing like thongs and shorts and he'd won a competition and it was just like, oh, hey, Harley. Yeah, cool kid. Like, it wasn't like a big grand plan, but I do think it's important to sort of like, to touch on that. Like, it's not just because you love something musically doesn't mean you're the best person to manage it. Like, it's got to make sense on multiple levels. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's very instinctual. Like, I think this is the best job in the world. You get to like help people like realize their dreams and do the things that they want to do, and it's, yeah, like you get to like make your living on like your taste. Like you get to say, I want to work with you. I want to help you do the thing you want to do. And yeah, we've been lucky. I hope it keeps going. Yeah.
In the age of the internet, I guess like ostensibly you think like, well, like regions don't matter. It's like all connected, but in many ways it means regions and like where you're based and all that means a lot more. Matt and Jody, you've moved to LA. Like, what motivates where you're located and where you're based, and like, how does that like help?
Well, me and like the majority of the bands that I manage are from Western Australia.
Yep.
We were always really proud to operate out of Western Australia, out of Fremantle, which is where we're all from and where we live. And we never ever thought we had to go to Sydney or Melbourne to be able to do it. And so we were all really proud of the fact that we could do it from there. And I think that really shaped what we do as well as a whole thing, like Spinning Top as a thing, and the bands that we manage and the music that they make, like being from the most isolated city in the world. We really were really isolated. Like, we were just doing this thing and we had no idea the impact it was eventually going to have. But when it came down, you know, it's very far away from the rest of the world, and even with the internet and phones and things like that, it still felt pretty isolated when it came down to the success that Tame Impala were having in America, that I just didn't know enough about. I didn't know enough about it. I didn't know how to basically, I really needed to learn more. When you can have success in such a huge market, you really don't want to do it wrong.
Yep.
And I didn't know enough about it to even be able to advise. Like, I need to advise the band on what the best things to do are. Radio, like, what the hell over there? There's like 1 billion radio formats and stations, and Tame Impala had a top 10 radio hit, and I didn't even know what that meant. So I was like, this is so bizarre, like, what's going on? And then before the third record came out, we went from a 2-person label at Modular in New York to, you know, a 200-person label at Interscope in LA.
Yep.
And I needed to make sure that I kept them on a very short lead because they didn't know us and they didn't know how to put out our records. So I had to move over there. I thought I was only going to be there for about 12 months setting up the record, but it was almost like starting to scratch the surface a little bit. I realised how much I really wanted to learn more, and I still don't think I've learned enough about, and you know, because it's the west coast of LA. It's just like a really, really large version of Fremantle, really. And I'm just dragging more and more people over there. So it's like, got my local bar down the street, and it's like full of Aussies that I've brought over.
How about you, Matt? Like, what was I guess, how did you adapt from going from the UK to the US? Like, pretty vastly different music markets.
Yeah,
like,
well, it's a different story, but the principle of going there is exactly the same as what Jodie's just said, basically. Raw Power Management is a UK, London-based rock management company, and as such, we were working in America more and more frequently, especially as bands that we managed like Bullet for My Valentine and Bring Me the Horizon were growing in the US and spending more and more time over there. And just the market dictates the demand, basically, because, you know, as a UK band, similar to here in Australia, you're only going to do so many dates per year in your home market, but going to the US, you can do a 2-month tour easily and not cover all the markets, and, you know, you end up going there 3 or maybe 4 times on an album cycle. So naturally, we were spending more and more time there. So it was twofold, really, the reasons we went. One was because we wanted to grow the careers of our UK-based artists, but we also wanted to start managing American bands as well. And up until 2011, when I actually moved to LA, we hadn't managed any American bands, and we'd had the conversations and we'd had the meetings, but we'd never actually landed one, and we were kind of realizing it was because we didn't have a base in the US. And if you're a US-based artist and you're taking on an international management company, I think it's quite a daunting thing to not have an office or being able to call a local phone number and have that communication. So we realized that we needed to be in the US, and an obvious place to go is LA. I mean, New York is a Nashville and Chicago are great markets for music and what we're doing, but it felt like, especially for rock music, LA is sort of the capital city kind of thing, and going in there and knowing the agencies and the other management companies and labels that were there, it just felt like an obvious place to go. Yep. And within a couple of months of moving there, we started working with American artists, and yep. Over that period of time, we've taken on more, and we've also grown definitely the careers of our UK-based acts. Especially, it's funny Jodie mentioned radio. I mean, radio is an obvious one. It's such a unique country for the radio formats that doesn't compare to anything that we have in the UK. It's very much BBC drives the agenda there. Things like Triple J obviously drive the agenda here. In the US, it's completely different, and going there and immersing in that environment was something that was only doable if you were there and attending festivals and gigs and events on a regular basis has been invaluable to learning about the market, and it's really given our company an extra edge, I think, compared to any of our competitors at home, for sure.
And you guys would have travelled with the bands across the US and meeting these radio
Definitely.
people and doing the handshakes and doing the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got your sights set on LA, Chad? Do you?
Do I?
So,
It's a constant topic of discussion at our office.
Yeah.
I just got back from the States. I mean, I feel like I'm talking a lot about Flynn. We do have other management clients, but this is relevant.
who cares?
Last year, we moved to, like, Harley, Nathan, his whole family, and I all moved to LA for 4 months. He had a lot of the record that he was going to write done, but I mean, in everything you guys just said about, like, industry being set up there's something going on in LA right now. It's very exciting creatively. There's a lot of artists, like the collaborative nature of the city right now it's vibrant. It's really exciting. So I think what was just said about, like, being there and having a home base there, we are feeling that. Like, it seems like it's going to make sense for us to have a presence over there. I don't know exactly what shape that's going to take or when we're going to go. It feels like we're there all the time as it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. I always thought I'd be like a New York guy.
Yeah.
But LA is pretty cool, actually. It's super fun, and I mean, there's a shit ton of Australians out there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really feel like you're
really
like going
doesn't.
anywhere that foreign.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a lot to do out there, and it's an interesting place in terms of, like, talking about, like, when you don't know what to do, like when you're not sure of next moves. We've always taken a fairly open approach, asking people that we respect. Like, we acknowledge our mentors, like the people that have helped us do the things that we've done, and, like, when we didn't know how to do something, like, just talk to as many people as you can. And obviously there's a much more, like, it's a very vast resource when you start talking about North America. There's so many people there, and yeah, it's super helpful. And for the most part, we found people were pretty open. Like, you come across the occasional dickhead, but for the most part, just sort of being quite genuine and just sort of being like, we're trying to do this. Can you help? Can you show us a bit of direction? We've always found it's pretty handy, and I don't know, LA feels good right now.
Well, we mentioned earlier that this is as close as you can get, like, as a manager, that's as close as you can get to the creative process. But, like, is being a manager, like, an art, like, in itself? Like, do you feel like you have to be creative in, like, what you do? And
I don't know that it's just, like, you are very close to lots of things, and you're probably the most likely person that when a problem arises, the artist is going to come to you. Again, as well as being a part of the management team at Future Classic, I head up the A&R department. So for me, I feel like I do get to have creative input, but there's lots of different ways you can be creative in music. Like A&R through to marketing. Like, there was a panel this morning that talked about A&R and marketing. I do think some of the funnest parts of being creative, like in the industry, is actually figuring out a strategy. How are we going to do this thing? Like, these are our goals. How are we going to realize them? Like, I don't. It's very different with different artists, like in terms of how close to the process you can actually get. I mean, there's nothing better than when you get sent a song that, like, you know that's going to be a song. Like, you know that's going to be something special or important, and then, like, you remember it. Like, you open that email or you're on the tour bus and it got played, and so for that, it's very gratifying and it's exciting, but I don't know if it's the closest part to the creative process. I mean, it can be, but I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I've had to be pretty creative it's just thinking about, like, I was talking about this story yesterday, and it's got back to American radio, because basically, like, American radio sort of works in this way where, and this is just a really simple way of putting it, it's like, the more you do for them, the more they'll do for you. So it's like, if you bring the band in to play some sessions or whatever, then, and telling Kevin Parker that he has to do something for someone to play his music is going to get a they can go fuck themselves kind of response. So you have to be really creative in a way where you go, how am I going to put this to him where he thinks that that's not what's really happening? Because you've got to work out, like, you know, I'm not trying to make him do something he doesn't want to do. He actually would be fine to do it if he didn't think he had to do it for them to want to do that, you know? So it's like, okay, how do I get this to happen without anyone really realizing this is what's happening? Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff, I think, that comes with being a manager as well. It's like working out what could be the best without anyone really realizing what's going on. You know, that sort of thing. I've been creative.
How about you, Tom?
Well, I think it really depends on the artist. As far as like an A&R side of things, like some artists have it sort of internally built. Like for the National, like they've been playing together for so long, and like Aaron will push back on something that Matt wants to do, or Matt will push back on something that Aaron feels is right. But like where someone like UMO, I feel like he actually brings me into that sort of process a lot earlier on. Like he'll send me early demos and like ask like what I think about certain things. Like if so yeah, I think it really depends on the artist.
Yeah. Well, let's talk quickly about like the blurred lines between like management, A&R, and I guess like label. Like, do you have to be like a jack of all trades and a master of all trades? Like, and how much are you still learning about those different aspects?
I feel like if you stop learning, you probably should just actually stop.
Yeah.
Like because I don't know. For us, we sort of came to management after having been a label, having been an inbound touring agency, having done events, published. Like, so we kind of learnt our trade by doing all of the other bits, and then being like, so we already have all of those people in the room. Let's try actually like be the CEO and the HR guy. I don't know that it's sort of, again, it's so specific to each artist, and that's like the biggest thing I think about management is you're telling the story or trying to like elevate the story of that one person. And I really like that in our sort of the family that makes up the Future Classic roster. It's a very collaborative thing. Like when we have like someone like Taku working with like other artists in the roster, other vocals. I mean, we have a very producer-heavy roster. We're like, any vocalists out there, hit us up. But it's a case-by-case thing for sure. And I think for us, we still always describe ourselves as an A&R-driven management company. Like the music is what gets us excited. So we do like to think that we're on the creative side, but you can't ever take away from the fact that you're not the artist. Like they're the one doing the thing. So yeah.
I'm terrible at A&R with my bands because everything they give me, I just love it, straight up. I'm just like, this is amazing, it's so amazing. So I definitely have to take a step back and, you know, try and think about it. You know, if they really want my advice, I've got to really sort of step emotionally back from what they're doing, because basically otherwise I just love everything. So, you know, I'm not great in that aspect.
It is very much case by case, though, as the guys have said, not to repeat everybody already, but you know, some artists come in to an album session and they'll record 40 pieces of music in demo form, and then they send that out to their sort of close team, and you review that and you give input and you give advice. But often, if an artist is good, they're going to have a pretty clear vision of what they want to do, and that's what they do. And we are facilitating the other aspects of their career, but that creativity is very much down to the artist, and a good artist will will live and die by that, you know. Some artists deliver 10 songs for an album and that's all you get, and you don't even get
definitely.
any input,
Yeah.
and it is what it is. But at the same time, you know, if someone's going down the wrong path, and at a certain stage in their career, you have to be able to stand up and go, hey guys, like, you need to think about that again, maybe, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't always go down well, and it doesn't always get listened to either.
Yeah.
But all we can do is advise and
Yeah, well,
give guidance, really.
yeah, well, that's the thing with both A&R and creative, the two things we've been touching on. My thing is, I'm happy to put my ideas forward, but I'm never in the slightest way offended if they get shut down straight away. So I'm like, hey guys, this is my opinion, take it or leave it. And you need to have that mentality, because as Chad said, if you start thinking otherwise, well, you'd also drive yourself insane. But
Well, learning how to like write feedback, that was something that, as in like, you're sharing your opinion. It's a subjective thing, of course,
Yeah.
but like, there's definitely ways you can be like, I feel this could be like this, rather than like, this is shit. There's definitely ways you approach these things.
Yeah.
I think you also never want to lose sight of the fact that the artist is like the one that's the successful artist for a reason, and I'm the manager. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not like they're the ones with the talent.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we'll open up a Quanda session if anyone in the audience has any questions. You, sir, in the colourful shirt. Mikey.
How did I get him to go to radio? I just didn't say that if he didn't do it, that they wouldn't play his songs. I just said, hey, do you want to do this thing? It'll be totally cool if you do it, and then he did. So it was just one of those things. I just didn't have to explain that the radio person was telling me that if he didn't do it, that it wouldn't be played, and I just had to hope that he'd want to do it. So yeah.
Can I just
That's
say,
all.
Hopefully he's not in the audience right now.
I was trying to get a on-ground interview with Kevin last year at Splendor for Noisy, and then they were like, oh, actually, his girlfriend really likes ID. Do you want to do it for that? And I was like, yes. So like, that's how we got the interview.
Pretty
across the
much.
line.
That's, yeah. Yeah, he definitely just does what he wants. But
Sweet.
yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
I was just wondering how you deal with like the weight of the decisions you have to make on behalf of your artists and the guilt you might have.
It's really tough, actually, sometimes.
I mean, but it's part of the job. Like, someone has to make the tough decisions, and that's us.
Yeah.
And it's for better or worse, I think.
Look, I've had sleepless nights over making a decision. You know, if I'm sitting with something and I don't quite know, I mean, I probably won't sleep for a couple of nights just going, and I can't even talk to anyone about it. Like, not to my assistants or not to my artists, because it's like having, you know, all of the information, it's like it needs to be really clear, and sometimes it'll just take time, but it is fairly weighty. And you really want to make the right decision. It's not something that you can be really flippant about, I don't think.
Yeah, and
It's serious for
I
all
think
of
it goes with someone else is talking about how you're like constantly learning and you surround yourself with like a team. Is you need to like take advantage of the people you work with. Like if you're not, you know, sometimes it's good to talk through decisions with other people on your team that you trust, or you know,
Definitely.
or know that you don't necessarily always know the right answer. That there are people that know the better answer sometimes. So
I think it's
I don't know not being the wrong answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
that's definitely
yeah,
something.
definitely.
And also having time to, like you said, like not being flippant about certain situations when you have like
Totally.
200 emails, 300 emails that
Yeah.
you wake up to every morning, and the need to constantly respond and give answers immediately. It's not always going to help any situation when
Yeah.
you're actually thinking about it, talking it through with your team.
Yeah,
It's going to give a much better perspective on it.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
right.
Sorry, I think it's also important to remind your artists that if it all fell over tomorrow, you're still alive. Like, it's music. It's a thing that you do, and it's great. It's a
It's not
privilege.
heart surgery.
But
I
yeah,
think,
like,
yeah.
you might be changing the world. Like, some artists we're talking about on this panel, like, I really love Tame Impala. Like, they probably are. Like, but at the end of the day, like, it's a thing that you're doing, and it's creative, it's art, but there's more to life than just doing that. And I usually find when you have those kind of moments, they're few and far between, but when you actually connect with someone and you talk like that to them,
Yeah.
the decisions get easier. Like, you
it's-
can actually step back a touch and be like, oh, yeah, there's other things in
Well,
life
it's
than
funny
this.
because it's actually my artist who said that to me. They were like, no one's going to die if you don't answer an email today. How about you
Yeah.
just don't answer any emails today, Jodie? And was
I can
like,
be pretty lazy.
huh.
If my artist started saying that, like, not much would get done. So.
I was like, I feel like it was a huge relief to me. I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
No,
Thanks, boss.
Yeah, it's a bit cliche, but I do have to remind myself very often that we're not saving lives with what we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
As
totally.
Chad said,
Just
one of
rock
our
and
artists
roll.
could write a song which changes someone's life, of course, but us personally, day to day, yeah, there's no one on the operating table.
pretty
and
fun.
yeah, if I didn't tell myself that every day, it might be a bit hard to do what I do.
Sweet. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, Jodie, what it's like managing several bands with the same members.
Well, you know, we've all worked out which side our bread is buttered. So we definitely,
Want to elaborate and tell us what you mean by that?
it's like, well, Tame Impala has to come first because this is how we get paid. So the other guys, you know, they're like, okay, well, we'll wait until there's breaks in that schedule. Like, we're all doing it. There has to be priorities, obviously. And with Tame, Tame Impala give us the freedom to be able to do these other things, you know, and all of the boys understand that, which is really great because everyone, you know, realises that this is what they do and they get paid well, and then they can go off and do their solo projects and they can pay for their own albums and they can pay for their own videos and they can take themselves on tour and all of that. So it can get really complicated so like with Pond, for example, who have a certain level of success, and it's sort of sometimes a real pain in the ass that Tame's a bit in the way. But we just have to, you know, we have to deal with it and just work it out with schedules about how much people want to do. It can get pretty interesting. Yeah, it's a juggling act for sure.
Well, how do you all like sort of balance those like album release cycles and like other artists are like more prolific than other artists? Like, how do you like schedule that and like forecast for the next 18 months? Like, how much juggling is there?
Oh man, I feel like we have been so lucky with like never having an album release, like within like a couple months of each other
Yeah.
for artists. But I know it's gonna happen someday, so I'm just a little bit. I'm scared. I'll answer that question when that actually happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got so to members of Tame Impala who are also in Pond. Then there's also members of Pond who have solo records, and I reckon in the next 4 months there's going to be like 3 or 4 albums of people associated in each other's bands, and it's a fucking nightmare. Like, and you really do have, like I had to say to Jay, like he's in Tame Impala and Pond, and he's like, yeah, I've got another album, and I was like, oh God. But you know, Pond has to take the priority. That's what I had to say to him. I was like, well, Pond have been working at it for this amount of time, and we can't just drop, you know, you're going to be doing press for Pond and stuff. You can't be doing press for your own album at the same time. It's just not going to work. Sorry, like we've got to work out how to do this. How do you want to do this, you know? So it gets really hard, and it's hard to say to them, you can't put your album out now if you want to, because Pond has to come first. But they get to understand that if they're going to be doing, you know, making 3 albums a year.
Fortunately, most artists deliver their records really late and run out of time anyway, so you can kind of juggle it. Just like,
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's a weird thought. Like, if an artist delivered early, would you be like, "Did you really give this a shot? Like, sure you don't want another month?" Like,
but yeah, like on time.
1%
like-
better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes. Yeah, definitely, absolutely, 100% trial and error. You know, I tried to learn off. You know, you ask other people questions. You really don't know, and we've all said this a million times. But each band is different. Their needs are different. What they want is different. Obviously, people's reactions to them when you start sending music to people. If people want to book them for shows or if people want to play their stuff on radio, you can ask as many questions as you like to other more successful people, but really until it happens to you, you really don't know what is happening or what is going on. And I really felt like the first few years were pretty hectic, like really not knowing what was going on and really having to, because it was pretty sort of quick ride at when the whole Tame Impala thing started happening. And that's why we're so close, I think, because we grew together completely. It's like we did not know what we were doing at all.
But, I think that, having the trust in each other and believing in each other, and we always did, and we just worked out how to do it, but it was definitely trial and error, not knowing, really. And those things that come at you, it's like some of the things that were being sort of thrown at us is like stuff you can't even make happen if you wanted to, and it's just how reacting to it, really, and trying to work out the best way of doing it, really. It was crazy. I'm
Might
still
have
here.
time for one quick, maybe two. Do you want to go first?
Are there as many unsuccess stories as there are success stories?
Way more, probably. Of each of us?
Yeah, from bands that you've managed or...
What's the question?
Are there as many unsuccess stories as
Oh,
there
yeah.
are success
Yeah.
stories?
So many,
Yeah.
so many.
Yeah.
I mean, our company manages 22 acts
Whoa.
worldwide, and we have, a bunch of acts that are in development and that have probably been in development for quite a long time, and might only ever be in development. But, and we've had acts that we've managed that we don't manage anymore that have gone on to success, and some haven't, and some have split up, and it's just kind of the nature of how things go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Definitely.
defining what success is important as well in those relationships. Like actually having that conversation about like, what do you want out of this?
Yeah.
Seems a bit dicky and a bit like,
Yeah.
hey, we're in like high school and we're setting goals, but it's important because what you might deem successful might not be what your artist actually really cares about.
Yeah.
And until you actually
Yeah, absolutely.
talk about that, things
And managing
often,
expectations as
Yeah.
well of the artist who might think that they want to do this thing. It's like,
it's like, oh, well, like I remember having a conversation with an artist and they told me their sales target for their first record, and I'm like, cool, Taylor Swift sold that many records this year.
wow. Yeah.
And, but it's good to be communicating about those things, and you shouldn't look at it like in a, like that level of, like, I don't know, it's a creative pursuit. It's subjective.
We'll
Like,
squeeze
if
in
you're happy,
one more question.
if you're happy with the records, it's a success. Like,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
might get a one-word answer, but
It's a bit of a big one. What do you think of co-management? And do any of you guys co-manage artists with this? And like most of all, the expectation on the artist point of view as you're growing in your career is to go, we need a big US manager, we need a big UK-based manager. How do you approach that conversation?
It's never happened to me.
Yeah, I never had a co-manager situation.
No.
cool. We're out of time.
Sorry.
Thank you all very much for
Thanks.
being
Thank you,
wonderful
Matt.
advanced managers. Thank you all for attending. Cheers.